Hey guys, Dylan from the Geek Duo here, and today I'll be bringing you my Hero Academia Chapter 304 read-through. Now, this chapter, it's actually a very enjoyable chapter, especially compared to the one we got last week. I still stand by the fact that that was a sort of a letdown in terms of the arc we just had. It kept some momentum for the first couple chapters in the hospital, then dropped off when we were repeating stuff we'd seen a couple chapters earlier. But this chapter has brought it back up and a little extra. It also answers several questions and completely negates one of the main arguments against Deku as a main character. I'll explain more on that at the end. So, the chapter starts exactly where the last one ended, with All Might thinking about being able to feel all for one inside of Midoriya. He thinks, I can feel it in one for all inside him. However, I can barely sense it happening. We then move inside Midoriya's head, past the near-conscious thoughts, worrying about everyone that he knew was in the fight. Aizawa, Manuel, Rocklock, Torino, Kachan, Togata-senpai, Ryukyu, Todoroki-kun, Ida-kun, Endeavor, Hado-senpai. It moves past these thoughts on the forefront of his mind to a deeper place, where the thoughts are not all his own. We are back in the vestige world, and this time we see all of the vestiges, not like just the shadowy figures or a lineup of them. No, we see all of them communicating with each other and communicating with Midoriya. Though the second and third users, they're standing facing the wall, almost like they don't want Midoriya to see who they are. So they're on this floating chunk of a room. You can see in a later chapter that it's got 3 walls, I'm pretty sure. Hang on, I'm trying to get the shot of the room. Yeah, it's got, well, the equivalent of 2 rooms, because it's half a room in and of itself, and from that half a room on the sides there's a wall, and there's the full back wall, and there's a collection of 8 chairs in a semicircle, all facing Midoriya. And they're not actually in order of when they got their power, because from left to right we've got the 4th user, the 7th user, the 1st user, the 8th user, the 6th user, and the 5th user. Then the 2 chairs for the 2nd and 3rd, whichever order they sat in. Banjo, the 5th user, says, we need to have a talk before you wake up. Sorry to put this on you while times are still this tough. Well, this is fate. Well, it's more OVA's timing thing, really. Banjo-senpai talked to you last time, right? So, in order of talking, we have Banjo, who is the 5th user. We have One for All, the 1st user. We have the 4th user. We have Banjo again. We have the 6th user. Nana doesn't say anything, and All Might just looks at Midoriya. Midoriya thinks, One for All's successors in a visit again. But it looks like we have a bit of time here. Previously, we were only able to interact with you when we were severely mentally shaken. In the past 4 months, my power, one for all, has been growing exponentially. And with that increase in capabilities, profiles of the previous holders of One for All were copied and pasted, and over time we were able to communicate with one another as well. Since the previous encounter with my brother, forcing himself into our domain, it's become easier for us to come before you. Which explains how all 8 of them are in front of Midoriya at once, where previously either it had to be a special circumstance, like Midoriya's quirk nightmare, or when All for One broke in and Nana and the first user were there. Well, your privacy is safe, so you don't need to worry about being watched all the time. Actually, you have no mouth again. No, even back then, I was able to make a noise. My voice is slowly manifesting itself in this rain. Midoriya only able to really make vowel noises, and the minor consonants says, "What do you mean about having to talk?" I will do the talking. Suddenly, while Midoriya is turned to address Banjo, the 4th user, whose name is Hagake Shinomori, got up and walked over to him and was towering over him menacingly, and then he drops it for a more friendly demeanor. My name is Shinomori Hagake, and I am the 4th user of One for All. Your previous fight brought forth my power through your will. Right. You scared me then. I was alerted to be alert to your alertness manifesting. Mr. Shinomori here is a weirdo hermit who lived in the woods because he was so irritable when it came to society. It was a turbulent time. I wasn't the weirdo. Everyone else was. So, there's some banter between the 4th and the 5th user. The first instance is when Banjo is talking about his predecessor, he's trying to put an arm around his shoulder, but he uses danger sense to dodge out of the way. And then as he's addressing Midoriya, saying, "Are you aware of my age and cause of death?" he's actually using it to avoid Banjo's black whip attacks. You were 40. Cause of death was... Almost files didn't list the cause of death. No, it looked like he scratched it out while writing. It was old age. Old age? At 40? I didn't understand why either. Banjo and I were discussing it amongst each other, but it was through Yagi-kun that we were able to understand. In layman's terms, One for All is no longer able to be held by a regular person. Huh? I held One for All for the longest out of anyone aside from Yagi-kun. For those 18 years, I evaded All for Ones while training this power. With his phenomenal strength, I realized that I would never be able to beat him in that state. I just had to nurture this power myself so that someone else could do it. And in my final year, the quirk broke my body. We get just little snippets of flashing between the people and the area of the vestige realm. Like, we get a close-up of Midoriya's face, a close-up of Hakage's face, a snippet of Hagake training, where he's in a he's in a Taekwondo stance, and he's got a boulder that's been split in half in front of him. And when he says his quirk broke his body, he reveals the scar that's running down his face. That everyone, well, not everyone, but a lot of people thought was an indicator that he was the previous user of decay. Anyway, at first I thought it was a case of me having a weak constitution. At worst, a chronic disease. But with Yagi's existence, he would confirm all theories and suspicions for me. Me dying of old age, it meant that One for All will slowly but surely burn away the life force of any one of its holders. Life force? That's terrible. But wait a minute. What about All Might, who held One for All way longer than Shinomori-san? That's the thing we're trying to say. Yagi thought that the incongruity in lifespan had to do with some invisible limit to the load each of us could take on. I didn't have One for all that long, and I died while fighting, so there wasn't a lot to compare it to. Which led to Shinomori-kun wondering to himself if Yagi had something he didn't. Oh my, he's quirkless. Right. It's with Yagi-kun, who's still alive today, that we earn this information. As a model of his subconscious relays all the information he learns back to us. Now that right there, the fact that a model of All Might's subconscious is informing the people in the vestige world of what he learns, meaning that All Might as a person and the All Might in the vestige world are still linked, and everything that All Might in the real world learns, All Might in the vestige world learns, which means that if All Might were to, say, go meet up with Stain, like we never got to see him do, and in that time, Stain and him accidentally ran into Shigaraki, and say Shigaraki killed All Might, and then framed Stain for doing it. The All Might inside Midoriya's head would be able to tell him that it was in fact Shigaraki, and that Stain would be okay to partner up with to take down Shigaraki. You see what I'm getting at? That is a very powerful thing to happen. Anyway, we haven't brought it up with you just yet because we weren't so sure, but after listening to my brother, I believe the confirmation is clear. The idea that a portion of a quirk user's conscious permeates with the new user makes us wonder how and why elements of Yagi-kun's being are here, despite him being quirkless. We thought that a successor's consciousness manifesting itself in this realm was tied to their quirk, but Yagi, being quirkless, is different to all of us, so he's a unique sample that we'll have to observe. It seems as though Yagi alone was able to summon our consciousness without knowing about it himself. For 40 years, Yagi-kun has had One for All. Those who are born with a quirk already have their metaphorical cup filled, and adding One for All to that cup makes it crack and spill over, leading to what happened with Shinomori. Toshinori's cup was empty, so One for All likely conformed and fitted itself to become his true quirk in a sense. Though it is still unknown as to the causal relationship between One for All being inherited and adapted with the user's quirk, it looks as though the least to offer, the quirkless have the most potential when inheriting this power. In summary, we cannot risk passing this quirk onto normal people already blessed with quirks of their own. And there we have it. I do like the imagery we get in this. Like, it's still just shifting between the people, showing panels when it's referring to them. When Midoriya remembers that All Might was quirkless, we do actually get to see Senior at UA Toshinori again, standing behind Midoriya. He's not actually there. And when he was talking about Hagake being able to summon the consciousness, we see All Might outside of the Vestige world with his hand on Midoriya. And I'm not sure if this is just stylistic or meant to be interpreted this way, but the bandages on Midoriya's arm, the outlines are all shaky and blurry. The same can be said about only the outlines of the parts of All Might's fingers that are touching said bandages. So, whether that's meant to show that through being physically connected to Midoriya, he's able to extend himself into One for All more than he was able to when he had the quirk, because he's using Midoriya's physical body as a conduit for his mind, his subconscious. Also, I like how when it shows the cup metaphor, we see that all of the other users, their cups have cracks or are overflowing and that. All Might, I'm going to assume it's still glass, but it looks like a chalice, as opposed to everyone else getting a cheap wine glass. He seems to get like a silver or gold chalice, even though it's probably still glass. We then get the next big piece of information from this chapter. They can't risk giving the quirk onto someone who had a quirk already. Had they done that, from All Might to, Mirio could already be dead. Because for one, every component of it is working in exponential growth, meaning that what once was the power of one person is now the power of, I don't know actually how many, because I've plotted it out that there are 4 possible ways in which it grew. But yeah, in the minimum, it's the power of 9 people in one, and at the maximum, I think it was over 200 people in one, in terms of strength. But yeah, anyway, had that power gone into Mirio, what once killed someone in 18 years of having it, so from 22 to 40, where their vitality is still still very high, if it killed them in 18 years, the exponential growth to when someone, say, Mirio's age, who is, 18? I think he was? 18, 19? Whatever. Let's say he's 18. I doubt he'd make it to 20. Yeah. I highly doubt that if Mirio were to get One for All, despite being a much better choice than Midoriya, which was the entire purpose of Mirio's character, to be a much better choice than Midoriya. It's even said in the show that Mirio would have been a much better choice than Midoriya. Midoriya even tries to give Mirio the quirk, but Mirio turns it away, saying that he would become a hero of his own accord, and he wouldn't be the reason that someone else loses their ability to be a hero. Which means that likely, had the scenario even come up where All Might was offering Mirio his quirk, there is valid reason to believe that Mirio would not have taken the quirk, because it's not of his own accord, and he would be stopping All Might, the number one hero, from being able to do his hero duties. And yeah, it was the entire point of his character during that overhaul arc to be the much better choice, and for Midoriya to prove himself to Sir Night-Eye that he was a worthy choice, and to prove it to himself that he was a worthy choice. And he did that, which means that Mirio, in terms of that character portrayal, had served his purpose. And the fact that a lot of people stuck on that and still to this day say that Mirio would have been a better choice, they didn't understand the point that was trying to get across. And now, to sort of shut those people up, Horikoshi has put in that if you give it to someone who has a quirk, they're going to die very young, and they can't risk giving it to someone else. Anyway, with that rant being over now, back to the chapter. Midoriya takes a moment to reflect on what One for All said, and then summarizes with, One for All needs to be given out cautiously. That's what you're saying? With each generation, quirkless people have become more and more infrequent, which means potential applicants are limited. This is something neither you, Yagi, nor any of us could have predicted. The fact that One for All was passed on to you was nothing short of a miracle. If only we were able to communicate with our successors faster. Perhaps we could have prevented the tragic death of more people. In other words, kiddo, you may be the last successor of One for All. Me? The last? Anyway, that was the main topic. Izuku-kun, are you able to kill Shigaraki Tomura for me? When it says, perhaps we could have prevented the tragic death of more people, we get a panel with the back of Sir Night-Eye, sort of insinuating that had they been able to relay this information to Midoriya quicker, and as well as the quirks were given to him quicker, Midoriya probably would have been able to save Sir Night-Eye from death. And we also get All Might's placeholder looking down in mourning as well at this panel, so he's probably thinking about Sir Night-Eye as well. And also, the fact that it's Nana Shimura as the one who says, are you able to kill Shigaraki for me? So, she knows that there's nothing left of her grandson in there. Well, I mean there is, and that is likely the route that Midoriya is going to take, but to everyone, including his own kin, Shigaraki is not Tenko Shimura. He is not Kotoro's son. He's not Nana's grandson. He is only a child that was raised by All for One. And as tragic as that is in their eyes, he still has to be stopped. And I'm getting a very Kiyoshi vibe. Kiyoshi? I said that weird, but anyway. From Nana in this moment. Because a lot of people this is an Avatar rant, so just skip ahead to the end of it. A lot of people misconstrue what Kyoshi said to Aang just before he fought the Fire Lord. She says only justice can bring peace. Yes, in her time, she did use violence to sort out her issues. She hated killing. And, well, she was not telling Midoriya to kill. It's just that that was the only option presented to them at the time, because none of them knew about energy bending. So, at the time, the only justice they could have brought was death. However, once Aang found the energy bending lion turtle, Kyoshi would have been all for taking away Ozai's bending. And she wouldn't have been like, nah, still kill him. And that is what I feel Nana is taking the role of. The only option that is clearly in front of them is that Shigaraki has to die. And down the line, some miraculous way that none of them could have predicted, because none of them knew about it, is going to present itself, and Midoriya is going to use that to save Shigaraki. And so people think back on this chapter and be like, oh, Nana's saying kill her grandson when they could have just done this, yet none of them knew that they could do that. And I'm just predicting that because I know there are those people out there that will, like me, relate Nana to Kyoshi. However, they will be relating it to the wrong Kyoshi. But yeah. Well, there wasn't a lot to talk about in this chapter in terms of, like, physical events. There was a lot to talk about in terms of information. And this chapter was personally a great chapter because I like when the power and abilities of characters are actually defined. It shows a great deal of storytelling ability if you can create a world where people have powers and those powers are clearly defined. Like, each power in My Hero Academia, it has its advantages, it has weaknesses. We see these weaknesses. Now, as opposed to Ruby, which is my favorite show, very few of those powers, the semblances, have weaknesses that are shown. There's the universal weaknesses, which is a person's aura running out, so they can't actually activate their semblance. There are exceptions to that. And that's the only weakness known for most characters. We also don't know the majority of the characters' growth with their powers, so we can't tell whether they've actually grown or not, whereas with My Hero Academia, they're clearly defined. Their weaknesses are shown, their growth is shown, and when a quirk awakens the second time, we've actually seen what it was at its base level and can compare it to its awakened ability. Whereas with Ruby, when a semblance evolves, we don't know all the time what it was originally. Like, there could be characters in that show that have already had their semblance evolve, and we wouldn't know because we didn't see it at its base form. Yet, here, every quirk reawakening has been shown. And that's why I personally like this chapter, because it's just adding more power law and drawbacks for One for All. And well, yeah, I just think that's great. Anyway, if you guys enjoyed this chapter and wanted to point out any of the information that I may have missed in this chapter, any of the information I got wrong in this chapter, or you just want to talk about some good power systems in other shows, comment them down below. And with that being said, I'll catch you in the next one.